Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're re-diving into a story that sits right at that eerie intersection of childhood nostalgia and unexplained phenomena. It's a tale that starts with something familiar of the renovation of an old, forgotten playground, but takes a turn into the truly bizarre. Imagine this, a construction crew working under the hot sun, digging up the past. But what they unearthed wasn't just old metal and faded paint. They found something that defied all logical explanation. They dug up the old playground, and long after everyone had gone home for the day, they found the swings still moving. The place was called Crestwood Park, a name that probably sounds like a dozen other parks you might know. For decades, it was the heart of a small, quiet town, a place filled with the echoes of children's laughter, the squeak of seesaws, and the rhythmic creak of swing sets. But as the town grew and newer, more modern parks were built, Crestwood fell into disuse. Weeds cracked the pavement, the merry-go-round rusted in place, and the paint on the climbing frames peeled away like sunburnt skin. It became a ghost of its former self, a place kids whispered about but rarely visited. Finally, the town council decided it was time for a change. The plan was to tear it all down and build a new community center. It seemed straightforward enough. A simple demolition job. The crew, led by a seasoned foreman named Dave, arrived on a bright Monday morning. The first few days were routine. They fenced off the area, brought in the heavy machinery, and began the slow process of dismantling the skeletal remains of the playground. The slab came down with a groan of tortured metal. The seesaw was hauled away. But the swing set was different. It was an old, sturdy A-frame model, made of thick iron poles sunk deep into concrete footings. It was stubborn. As Dave's crew worked to break up the concrete, a strange feeling began to settle over them. It wasn't anything you could put your finger on, just a subtle chill in the air, a sense of being watched. One of the younger workers, a guy named Mike, was the first to mention it. During their lunch break, sitting on the tailgates of their trucks, he said, "Does this place give anyone else the creeps?" The others sort of laughed it off. It was an old dilapidated park. Of course, it was a bit creepy. But Dave, who'd been on countless job sites, felt it too. There was a stillness to Crestwood Park that felt unnatural. The usual sounds of the city seemed to fade away at the fence line, leaving only the clank of their tools and the wind whispering through the remaining skeletal trees. As the week wore on, the strangeness intensified. Tools would go missing, only to reappear in odd places. A hammer left by the fence would be found sitting perfectly in the center of the sandbox. A thermos of coffee would be inexplicably knocked over when no one was near it. There were minor things, easily dismissed as forgetfulness or a prank, but the feeling of unease was growing, settling like a fine layer of dust on everything. The focus of this unease always seemed to be the old swing set, the last piece of the playground still standing. It resisted their efforts, its foundation seeming deeper and more solid than any they'd encountered before. The real mystery began on a Thursday evening. The crew had been working late, trying to break up the last of the concrete around the swing set's legs. As dusk began to settle, casting long, distorted shadows across the torn-up ground, they finally called it a day. They packed up their tools, locked the gate, and headed home, leaving the solitary A-frame standing like a monument in the center of the demolition site. Dave was the last to leave. As he locked the gate, he glanced back over his shoulder. For a split second, he thought he saw one of the swings, a simple black rubber seat on a chain sway slightly. He blinked. It was steel. Just the wind, he muttered to himself, shaking his head at his overactive imagination. He got in his truck and drove away, the image of the lonely swing set lingering in his mind. The next morning, the crew arrived to find something that made the hair on their arms stand up. Two of the swings were in motion. Not violently, but with a gentle, rhythmic back-and-forth arc, as if a child had just hopped off moments before. The air was completely still. Not a single leaf was stirring on the trees. There was no wind. They all just stood there at the fence, silent, watching the empty swings move on their own. Dave was the first to break the silence. "All right, who's a comedian?" he demanded, looking at his crew, but he could see the genuine confusion and fear in their eyes. No one was joking. This was something else. They cautiously entered the site. As they got closer, the swings slowly, gradually, came to a stop, one after the other. It was as if their presence had interrupted something. They inspected the area. There were no hidden wires, no devices, nothing to explain the movement. The ground around the swings was undisturbed, except for their own footprints from the day before. The day's work was tense. Every creak of metal, every gust of wind made them jump. They finally managed to break the swing set free from its concrete mold. As they loaded the heavy iron frame onto the flatbed truck, a collective sigh of relief went through the crew. They were glad to see it go. As the truck pulled away, a strange thing happened. A sudden, powerful gust of wind kicked up dust all around them, a wind that came from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. That should have been the end of it. The swing set was gone, hauled off to a scrapyard miles away. The site was cleared, and the new foundation was ready to be poured. But the story doesn't end there. A week later, Dave got a call. It was from a security guard who patrolled the new construction site at night. The guard, a nonsense ex-cop named Al, sounded shaken. "Dave," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you're not going to believe this. You need to come down here." Dave drove to the site, his mind racing. He found Al standing by the fence, staring into the darkness of the empty lot where the playground used to be. Al just pointed. "Listen," he whispered. Dave listened, and he heard it. A faint, rhythmic, squeaking sound. Creak. Squeak. Creak. Squeak. It was a sound he knew all too well. It was the sound of a swing in motion. But there was nothing there. It was an empty field of dirt. Yet the sound was undeniable, hanging in the dead-still night air. It was the ghost of a sound, an auditory echo of something that was no longer there. They stood there for nearly an hour, listening to the phantom swings of Crestwood Park, a chilling reminder that just because you tear something down doesn't mean it's truly gone. The memory of the laughter, the joy, and perhaps something else lingered on, etched into the very air of the place. What do you think was happening at Crestwood Park? Was it just a series of bizarre coincidences, or was there something more profound, more spectral at play? Are there places that hold on to memories so tightly that they replay them for anyone who is willing to listen? Let me know your theories and if you've ever experienced anything similar in the comments below. These stories are a fascinating look into the unexplained mysteries that hide just beneath the surface of our everyday world. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next exploration. Until next time, stay curious.